to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, this is Collett Smart. I'm a psychologist and a teacher, and I'm your host on Raising Teens. I'm also a parent, and so I'm in the middle of raising my own teens and young adults. I know that raising teens can be fun and crazy and exciting, but also terrifying and even lonely. I've experienced all of these emotions, sometimes all in the same day. On this podcast, I'm joined by well-known experts, and we will chat about some of the most common questions I get asked about raising teenagers in my own work, and even some questions I've had myself. I have such hope for this generation of young people. So each episode is jam-packed with support so that you can get on with the job that you do best. That is connecting with and loving your teen. Steve Biddulph is one of the world's best-known parenting educators. A psychologist for 30 years, he is now retired but continues to write and teach. His books, including The Secret of Happy Children, Raising Boys, The New Manhood, and 10 Things Girls Need Most, are in 6 million homes and 31 languages. They have influenced the way we look at childhood. Steve's live talks have had a remarkable public response, reaching 140,000 people. Many people express surprise at how moving and emotional these talks are, as well as how much fun. His latest book, which we talk about in this episode, is titled Fully Human. Today, we will unpack a lot of what Steve has found in his research and in his extensive experience so that we and our teens can be the best people we can be. Hello, Steve. Welcome to Raising Teens. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Collett. It's great to be talking to you and to everyone who's listening.
I am so honored to have you join me on the podcast. You are so kind and encouraging to me. You have been over many years, and I know to so many other people in our field. And I don't think there will be a parent who is listening who doesn't know about your work raising boys and raising girls and manhood. I'm excited for them to hear today about what you talk about as the culmination of your life's work, particularly in your new book, Fully Human. So would you like to just start us off on what that means for you and what we can learn from you today, Steve?
Sure. I'd love to do that. And as you can tell from my voice and people who have done their arithmetic, I'm getting really old now. And when you get old, you start thinking, well, have I solved the world's problems yet or not? And we just learned, Collett, this very exciting news that we just this year have sold our 6 millionth book in the world. And so,
wow, Steve, that's incredible. I'm so excited for you.
Well, thank you. But of course, as I said, the world is still pretty messed up and people are still having a lot of trouble. And so you start thinking, well, there's all this really great advice out there now and really good information, including a lot that you have written in your books. But when that doesn't work for people, what's the missing key? We all know, don't we, that you can have the facts and you know what you're supposed to do, but somehow it doesn't work because you're not quite right with yourself. And when you're not right with yourself, nothing goes right with your kids either. And so I began to about 2 years ago, started reading about the way we use our mind. And because I have some, people I see who have pretty serious trauma, we often working on how does your mind heal and how does it work properly when it is working. And this idea began to come about that some of the best brain scientists around the world think that we have been neglecting a whole half of our brain, which is the right hand. If you're a right-handed person, it's the right-hand side of your brain, which is where, in the old language, where our intuition lives. And so I thought I would, with people listening and with you, Collett, today, I would try and explain how to use that side of your brain so that you can connect with yourself better and connect with your young people better as well.
You've heard me say before that I rely on evidence and science when I make decisions. This activity that Steve is about to run us through is based on science, but it may feel a little bit different to what you are used to. So if you can, stop what you're doing, take a breath, and do this activity with us so that you can understand what Steve is talking about.
Okay, well, I thought we'd try a little experiment, which I do with my audiences sometimes, and which we can do right here today. Assume you've got a handful of kids in your family. If you haven't got kids, choose some other people like your parents or your neighbors or your friends, something like that. But say you've got kids, choose 2 of your children and just think, all right, who will I choose? This one and that one for the exercise. And then take one of those kids, decide on just choose one of the 2, and picture them in your mind, what they look like and maybe what they sound like, what their voice is like. And as you're picturing them, go down inside your body and notice, what are the sensations I have in my body when I think of that child? And where are they? Are they down in my tummy, or are they up around my heart, or are they in my shoulders or in my skin? What feelings, sensations do I have when I think of that child right now? And then let that go, move that to one side and think of the other child and picture them, hear their voice, what their voice sounds like, and just go down in your body and notice, when I think of that child, what are the feelings I have in my body? And whereabouts are they? Are they up around my heart or in my tummy or my intestines, or where are they happening? And they might be just very slight, subtle ones or quite strong ones. Now, if we come back again to just you and I talking again, Collett, then I don't know, did you notice anything when you did that?
Yes, I did. I noticed differences in what I was feeling.
Yes, now that's all we wanting you to notice, and people listening to notice, is it's very interesting. When we think of each child, we have, of course, we feel differently about them. And in fact, that's kind of like a moment-to-moment thing. It's how what your body tells you is what you're feeling right this second today. It could be different half an hour later. And so we began thinking about, well, what does that mean? And why is it your body? Why is it your tummy or your heart or that has those feelings? Because we talk about emotions like anger and fear and so on, but this is much more kind of subtle than that. And it turned out, and if anyone is really getting interested in this, you can go and Google the vagus nerve, and you'll get a picture that will come up on your computer screen of it's vagus, V-A-G-U-S. And it's called vagus not because it's vague, but because it's the old word for wanderer, a vagrant. It's a wanderer. And the vagus nerve comes down from your right hemisphere, down all the way down into your body and spreads out. It's the biggest nerve in your body. It wraps around your heart and your lungs and your intestines and your tummy. And you know that because you've just experienced it. When you think of a child, something happens in your tummy.
Yes. And I'm thinking, Steve, is it to do with, because of what I'm thinking about what's going on for that child today? I might be more worried about one of my children today, or more excited about something that's going on for one of my children. Is that what you feel makes the difference?
Yes. What it's to do with one half of your brain, you're thinking, I've got these things to do, and I've got to drive the kids to sport, and I've got to do this and this. But the other side of your brain is constantly working on the subtle feeling sides of things, and is noticing facial expressions and just little things. I'll give you a really good example. Was a story that I tell in the Raising Girls book about a girl called Genevieve. She's had a boyfriend for about 6 months. Genevieve's about 16 years old, and she comes home and she talks to her mum, and she says, "Mum, Mum, can I talk to you?" And the mum says, "Of course, Genevieve. What is it?" She says, "My boyfriend, he's leaning on me to have sex, Mum. Just lately, we've been going really well for, he's just a lovely guy. I love him so much, but he's been kind of pushing me to go a bit further." And Genevieve's mum, the radar comes on full beam, and she says, "Oh, Genevieve, that's, it's interesting. We should talk about that. How do you feel about it?" And Genevieve says, "Well, I'm really mixed up, Mum. I love him. He's the best boy in the whole world. Brilliant. I don't know what. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think. And then her mum says this really wise thing, like the Pulitzer Prize of things to say. She says, honey, sometimes our bodies send us signals. Your brain is going in circles, but your body sometimes knows what's right for you and it tells you. And Genevieve, this 16-year-old girl, straight away, she says, look, you're right, Mum. We'll be sitting in a bus stop somewhere in the rain and, having a bit of a kiss and a cuddle. And one minute I'm feeling really great. And then he comes on a bit strong and I feel really in my body, like I want to just get out of there. I don't want to have sex with him yet, Mum. And suddenly she knows. Does that sound right, Collett? She just suddenly knows. And it's her body that has told her. And so sometimes it's like we have a deep down wisdom. In the Fully Human book, it starts with the story of a patient of mine who was in a car park and a young man called out to her and she felt just this kind of really uneasy feeling and she hopped in a car and drove away. And later on that evening, news discovered that man had attacked someone in the same car park, probably just minutes after she'd been there. And yes, it was a terrible story. And she came for therapy because she had a lot of trauma about, it could have been her and what she should have done and everything. But her body knew there was something wrong with that man. He was well-dressed and he was polite and it was broad daylight in a train station car park coming home in the middle of the day. But something in her gut feelings said, this isn't right. And so what we began to write about in the Fully Human book was this thing of you can help your kids by encouraging them to listen to their bodies. And if you are feeling not quite right about something, to sit with it and try and have a talk to it. It's like a wild creature down inside you and say to it, why are you scared, wild creature? Is it this? Is it that? It's a lovely picture, Collett, that it's really come to be with me big time. It's like we've got a wild panther or a lion inside us, and it has no words. The only way it can talk to us is through our stomach and through our heart. But when we talk to it, it's very subtle. It notices things. It notices the change in tone of your child's voice, when they come home from school. Or it notices that they said yes, but it felt like no. and so, is this all making sense? I've run a lot of information.
Yes, and I think what I love about what you've written in the book, Steve, is that it's not, you very cleverly talk about how it's not kind of a woo-woo concept. This is actually based on science. And I know you've often spoken about how you are a scientist first in so many ways. And so this is something that we have discovered or we continue to discover as human beings. But this sense is very visceral rather than a verbal sense.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we've always had those words for it, intuition and sixth sense and things like that. And women are somewhat more comfortable to listen to that side of them. But we had no idea what was going on with it. And it turns out that all of the language abilities you have, these areas called Broca's area and Wernicke's area that are where words are put together, are in the left side of your brain. And the other stuff is in the right side. And so we have to get those two sides of your brain talking to each other again. But the wild creature side, it's kind of a hyper alert. And this is why we know, for instance, that we can't calm our kids down until we calm ourselves down. Because their right brain is switched on and it's noticing our facial expressions. You can say to your kids, I'm fine with that, or I'm happy, I'm not worried, but their brain is reading your brain through the right hemisphere. And so they just get this feeling like, well, it doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right. And so, if you say something like, you can always talk to me and tell me your problems, but your whole body is rushing to get out the door.
They know.
It puts us in this incredible challenge because we have to slow ourselves down. The job of a parent is to be less stressed than their children. And we're the anchor and we're the haven. And generally in this society, we've got busier and busier and more rushed. And so they sense that we're rushed. And so they feel rushed. And so when you sit with your children, the thing to do is to get in touch with your own body. And when you listen to the wild creature inside of you, you can tell if it's restless or if it's uneasy. And you can send it just a quiet little signal and say, look, I'm listening to you, And you can even say to your child, look, I don't know what it is, but I just feel uneasy about that party that you've been invited to. Are you really okay with it yourself? Or I feel a bit uncomfortable about that teacher that you've got, and this helps them because they're going to go out into the world. And for instance, I always paint this picture, say that, your teenager have grown up and they go overseas with their friends and they're drunk in Amsterdam or somewhere and they're getting into a car with some boys and they're nice boys and, it's fine, except if they tune into their hearts at that point, they might think, look, I don't really want to go driving when I'm drunk in a strange city. I really just want to go back to the hotel and get some sleep. And if they learn to read their own wild creature, they'll make better choices and they won't be able to be persuaded by often people sound very logical and say, nothing could go wrong, or I love you, let's have sex. It'll be great. And boy or girl, they'll think, well, thank you, but right now it doesn't feel right for me. I don't even know why, but it just doesn't.
So learning to listen to their own bodies.
Mm.
So Steve, coming back to how we are as parents then, in your book, I see that you often ask professionals, nurses, doctors, parents this question. You ask them, what is a human being? Can you talk about that, please?
Yes, see, we're human beings and we get around all our lives, but we don't often ask, well, what am I? And when you ask people to have a think about it, they usually say, okay, well, there's different dimensions to us. And I began to pull this together and to realize that there's a kind of a picture, and I call it the 4-story mansion. And what it is, it's like a building, and our mind has got like an architecture of 4 floors to it. And so we've just been talking about the body, which is, intuiting and, it needs cuddles and it needs to have a good breakfast and has, everything that a body needs. And then on top of that, there's the emotions, when we get angry or sad, that's another layer of ourself. So for instance, you can be hungry, but you're on a diet or a fundraising fast or something. And so you're hungry, but you feel really proud of yourself. So your feelings are good, even though your body would really like a sandwich. And then up above that is thinking. And thinking is what you do you're taught in school to think and to reason and everything. And that's really useful and be logical. And then, of course, if you've lived a bit and you've been through a bit in your life, you'll know there's another dimension on top of that, which is your spirit. And the spiritual part of your mind is the part that is open to the universe and to creation, to all of life around you. And it's the part where you don't feel separate from creation. You feel just lost in the beauty of life. And so there's your 4 floors. And many people, and I'm sure lots of people listening will have experienced this and in those around them.
Okay.
Some people get stuck on 1 floor and they sort of complain about the accommodation. They say, life is crap, life is terrible. And you listen to them a bit, they think, of course it is, because all you ever do is emote. You're stuck on your emotion floor and you're just having feelings. You think, I'm sure you can think of people, Collett, and everyone listening can think, some people just emote all the time. They're always angry. They're always upset. And they really need to get off that floor and come up a floor to the thinking floor and actually think about some options and some being a bit realistic and working out what to do. Now, there are a lot of people also, and some people will be married to someone like this who is stuck in the thinking floor and they just think and think and think and think. And they kind of go around in circles and they're very logical, but they're very boring. And they need quite often to come down a floor to get in touch with what they're feeling. And what we're adding in today to this, of course, is sometimes you have to go up to your spirituality part of you and say, well, I don't feel like doing this and I'm scared to do it. And my body's really shaking and trembling, but I believe this is the right thing to do and I'm going to do it anyway because I'm going to help that homeless person or I'm going to help that teenager to get something on track. And so, when you think of a parent, if you have a toddler and your toddler fell on the train tracks, you would jump down on the train tracks and you would grab them and throw them back on the platform. And the 4 floors is a beautiful mansion because you can move up and down and you have freedom and choice. And so you're in a dilemma, things aren't going very well, the technology's letting you down and it's causing all sorts of trouble. You go down into your body and say, look, it's all right, wild tiger, don't stress out. You come up to your feelings and just let them go. Let that adrenaline, I have lots of adrenaline in my system. Just have to let it move through, shudder and shake and let it go. And come up to thinking and think, okay, what do we do? It's the moving through the floors, and you can help your children. When a child is all upset and you think, okay, cuddle them, sit with them, eventually say, what do you think could be going on here? Bring them up into their thinking level. And we can coach them through all the levels to help them to turn on all the lights in their mind.
Steve, I actually, let me just interject quickly. You and I have a mutual friend, Andrew Lyons from The Right Journey. And you were speaking at a Right Journey conference. It must have been about 7 years ago now. And I have a photo of you and myself and Andrew Lyons with your 4-story mansion in the back on the whiteboard. I only saw that last night when I was looking at it. And I remember the really early stages of you talking about this beautiful concept. So I'd love to just explore each of the levels a little bit. We've spoken about your wild animal and how that's your super sense. But then you talk about how our emotion is not your super sense, because your super sense is really a lot about tapping into your body and how your body feels. And you've got beautiful illustrations in your book of getting your readers just to lift their little finger and then see how that changes the feelings or the sensations in their body, and then exercises to do to understand your emotion and so on. So can you just explain the difference between the bottom floor as your super sense part of your body compared to your emotive part of your mansion?
Yes, feelings are very familiar things. We know what anger feels like, and we know what sadness feels like. And so it's like old friends. And it's like that floor is kind of like a disco dance floor. It's full of emotions flying around. And so the thing is to realize that they really matter and they have a purpose. So that anger is to protect you. Its job is to stand up for you. If you're in a car park and someone comes screaming in their car and they run over your foot and they park on your foot, anger is, you say, move your car, and you have to have that. And fear is really important because it gets you to not take terrible risks. And sadness is the most interesting one to me, because our culture is so afraid of sadness, and yet sadness runs through life so much. And I tell the story of a dad with a little boy, and they're at home on a Saturday morning and they hear a car screeching outside the door, outside on the road, outside their house. Yeah. And the car skids, and they hear it skidding. And they go out there and, oh no, their dog, it's their family dog, has been hit by this car. And the little boy's only about 5 years old, and he's run out with his dad. He sees his dog there, and the boy just immediately, tears flood into him. And if this was in 1950, when I was a kid, his dad would have said something like, look, it's only a dog, we'll get you another dog, don't carry on, it's no point bawling like a Sheila, whatever. But today's dad crouches down beside the boy and says, oh, poor Jessie, she was a lovely dog. This is terrible. This is so sad. Let's bring her inside gently, and it's okay. I'm here with you. We'll take her inside. And the little boy's crying and the dad's crying. But even in the middle of that, Collett, the little boy has this feeling like, Dad's here with me. We're dealing with this together, and we're both crying, and it's bad, but it's not the end of the world. And that little boy is learning that when you're in a sad place, you can go through that and you can let those feelings out. And so when he runs into adult griefs in his whole of his life, he'll always have that feeling, no, we stick together and we look after each other, we get there. And so being comfortable with these terrible, intense emotions, and I write a story in the book, which I can't tell you on this interview because it makes me cry, about a miscarriage experience when I was a young dad. And it was months before I could cry. And the thing that helped me to cry was the song. I was playing a song on my guitar and all of a sudden started to cry. But people can read about that in the book if they'd like. But
yeah, it's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. It's a beautiful part of the book.
Yes, but if we know that our emotions are just like the wind in the grass, and they're moving us to somewhere better and somewhere good. They're keeping our hearts open even when it feels like hell. Then that whole floor of our mind can be a place that we're comfortable to go to.
Yeah, and even in the book, you talk about how because you worked through and allowed those emotions, it actually developed your relationship with your wife in a different way, rather than if you had blocked them off.
Yes, that's right. One of the things which we found in our work with families was that there was a terrible statistic, which was I was working with parents with sudden infant death syndrome, and about 75% of parents who lost a child, their marriage broke up some stage in a year or two following that. And so it was something about not being able to grieve together, getting out of rhythm with each other's hearts. And so our emotions and our physical bodies are processing these things. And when we look at each other's faces, you sometimes see this, sometimes in a really well-made film or a TV show, that people are looking at each other and they're both feeling it at exactly the same time, the grief or the love or whatever it is. It's like we're designed to feel together, and we help each other together. They filmed little tiny babies with their mums, and when the mum and the baby are looking at each other's faces, the mother's feelings communicate to the baby and they soothe the baby. So the baby's distressed, the mum looks into the baby's face, and the baby somehow sees the mum is calm and the mum is loving. I mean, she might be concerned for it, and the baby calms down. And when they do this in the laboratory, the baby's heartbeat slows. And so, like, we have to help each other. I think my part these days in the world is to kind of soothe and care for the mums and dads. And then the mums and dads care for the children.
Yeah, and then our children, Steve, learn how to process and manage their emotions, their anger or their grief.
Yes.
They're allowed to feel those things and then process them in healthy ways. I know you do so much with boys and men, talking about and encouraging men to model what it looks like to express their emotion to their sons, even their anger, but in healthy ways.
Yes, that was probably the biggest part of my life's work was of course the work with the raising boys and the manhood messages, because I think if you're in a male body, I think male feelings are not identical to female feelings. And we have to kind of learn how to live in a male body and how to drive one. And we do that best if we're around, whether it's dad or stepdad or uncles or granddads. If boys can see this is how a man is patient, this is how a man is loving. Any of those qualities we want to raise in our boys, they're not an abstract concept. Patience, let's say, choose patience. You want your son to grow up to be patient. Patience is a way of breathing, Collett. It's a way of standing. It's a way of walking slow. And you have to know someone who's patient before you can do that. And so role modeling is, we're a bundle of all the good people we've ever known. And we bundle them up and they store away in our brain and become us. And so if you're a single parent, dad or mum, you orchestrate for your kid to be around good people. If it's a gay man, what's a good gay man look like? If it's a different race, different culture, different age group, our kids need to meet lots and lots of different people so that they can make their own masculinity if it's a boy, or their womanness if it's a girl, and have all those examples to draw on.
And so, Steve, your next level then in your 4-story house is your thinking. So you talk about how that's your prefrontal cortex part of your brain, executive function, your analytical brain. That's where our words and our thoughts are. How do we help our teens who have a still developing prefrontal cortex? How do we help them in that level of their 4-story house?
You have lots and lots of conversations. And so when they raise the topic, and you're in the car going somewhere, you say, well, what do you think? How would that work out? And for instance, I like to have hypotheticals with kids. For instance, with teenagers, we're very aware of boys' behavior towards girls at the moment in our culture. And there's an example of, say, to your son, you're going to be at a party sometime with your friends.
Yes.
Just say that one of the girls at the party just got really, really, really drunk and she's almost passed out on the couch. And some of the other boys are kind of pulling on her clothes and joking around and mucking around with her in one of the rooms at the party. What would you do if that happened? If there was a girl who was in danger of getting groped or worse, what could you do? and your son might talk through his ideas and worries about that. And he says, he might say, "Oh, Mum, that'll never happen." And you say, "No, this will happen. Well, this will happen sometime." Now, the thing with boys and their thinking brain is that they do much better if they've had a previous rehearsal of what they could do or say. Does that sound right, Collett?
Yes, absolutely. Lots of conversations to help them think beforehand, because their prefrontal cortex isn't functioning as well, not because they're dumb, it's development, but it isn't functioning in the heat of the moment. So, Steve, it's such a good point.
Yes, you're really across this, Collett. I've seen this in your books, and it's so good, this neuroscience of teenagers, that they can sound great. They're so intelligent and verbal and everything. And that's terrific, but it's that heat of the moment. For instance, we know that a teenage boy driving a car on his own is actually probably better than you or I. He probably drives a bit fast, but he's very alert to his driving. But if you put 3 boys in that car, the fatal accident death rate of that car is 4 times more likely to die if he has friends in the car. We don't know why that is, but it's a pretty fair guess. It's a combination of showing off and mucking around and not using his prefrontal cortex. And so you talk about that and you say, "Look, I'm sorry, until you're 18, no driving your friends. I'll drive you."
I often get questions for the podcast, and 2 of these came from mothers about their husbands and how they relate to their teens.
Our first message says, "My husband is all about fun. He thinks our boys, 12 and 14, are too young for chores. He plays lots of Xbox with the kids, so in that sense I feel he has a better relationship with the boys because of this. I am the authoritative parent. I set the boundaries, ensure they follow routines, and manage technology in the house. It feels like I'm the bad cop because of this, and I don't feel like we're parenting together." Our second message says, "My husband is the breadwinner and provider, and I know he loves our children, but he never talks with them deeply about anything. I'm the one who has all the talks about sex, friendships, mental health, or tough times. He's never vulnerable about anything he goes through himself. He wouldn't even let our teens see him cry when he lost his own sister during COVID."
From what Steve has described, it sounds like the one dad might be stuck on the emotional floor where he's caring and fun, but he struggles to set boundaries. The other dad is stuck on the thinking floor where he's providing really practically for his family, but he struggles to have deep, important conversations with his children. Steve gives us some advice here.
Okay. Oh gosh, that's really a tough situation, and we have to get these guys to get their act together. I once had a group of 200 women in an audience, and I said to them, it was just after lunch, we'd been together for the whole day. I said, "I want you to design the perfect husband. Call out the qualities of a perfect man." And there was a bit of ribald laughter started off, but then we got serious. And they're calling out, and I'm writing all these words up on the board. When we got all those words up, about 50 words on the board, loving, kind, and reliable, and trustworthy, and honest, and we realized they came into 2 completely different lumps, 2 different columns almost. They were the kind and caring heart qualities and the strong, reliable backbone qualities. And the ideal man has got heart and backbone. If those women are listening, I'm sure you can relate to this, that first husband you described, Collett, was all heart and no backbone. And the second one was all backbone and no heart, or being a bit hard on that, but you get the picture. And I think often that's just that they don't know how to do the other side, and that no one's ever called them out on it. Or perhaps their own dad was like that and they've never seen a balanced man. And I think sometimes we have to sit down with our partners, and my wife Sharon has done this with me many times, and said, "There's something you need to fix. And for us to be in a team and do this family, I need you to whatever." And otherwise it's exhausting to be your partner because you're not doing the balance. And so I many times have sort of seen hell's bells. If I want Sharon to love and respect me, which I really do, I've got to shape up and move into kinds of things which are not comfortable or not not in my comfort zone, but I'm actually not that hard once you get started. And I love it with dads. I love starting dads groups and getting dads into groups, and so they can see and think about who does that well. Who plays with their children and talks to the children from their heart really well, and who's the dad who does the discipline and who does crack the whip when that's needed. How does he do it? And what kind of voice does he use, and how does he do it without becoming horrible? Sometimes a dad doesn't want to become a monster, so he doesn't even do any whip cracking. Sit down and have a talk. Us guys, we be a little bit defensive, but we know we're not perfect, and we would like to be in a functioning family. And so I think we'll be open to trying to be a different kind of man.
And you also talk about men having other men that they can learn to share with and who can challenge them.
Yes. Like they used to have Dads and Daughters Day at my daughter's school, and they would invite the dads to come, and we'd play sports, play netball, dads versus daughters, and things like that, and do craft work and things. I used to love those because I'd look at the other dads and think, I'm envious of what a comfortable relationship they have, and I'd take that as an example. Oh, look how he did that, and I think that's how we learn. And another dad might be, really good at setting boundaries. And because a lot of dads, when they set boundaries, they just sound mean and horrible. But no, that dad did it, and there was no drama, He stopped that thing going on, but there wasn't any cross, angry feelings about it. Yeah, we're learning all the time. I'm a 69-year-old learning how to do that. I hope, when I'm 85, there'll be some 90-year-olds I can learn from.
I love you. You've got a quote in your book about not being a perfect parent. That's a reminder I think we all need. We are always learning. And so, Steve, let's go now to your final floor of your house, where you say you open up onto the roof and there's this beautiful garden.
Yes, it was the way that I said was sometimes, you've got your 3 floors of your house, and then one day you sort of hear this music coming from the ceiling, and you have a look up at the ceiling of your 3rd floor, if you're thinking for it, and there's a crack in the ceiling, and then you see, oh, wait a minute, it's a manhole, there's a trapdoor. And you push open the trapdoor, and what do you know? There's open sky and birds singing and stars, and you go up and it's a roof garden. And this is winding down the poetry there. There's a part of your mind which is the wide open part. It's the part when you've been at the ocean for a couple of hours, just walking along by the side of the ocean, or you lie on your back on the mountainside looking up at the stars, and all of a sudden you realize it's not a theory. It's not just words. You actually feel I am part of the whole. And it's really, really important because it takes away loneliness and it takes away worry, and it gives you courage and a sense of that it's going to be all right. And then all the other floors are affected by that, and they all kind of fall into line. The ideal of life is that each of those 4 floors is all pointed the same direction. So what you're feeling like doing, what you are doing, what you're thinking is right, and your sense of connection are all going the same way. And I get that feeling when I'm teaching sometimes or writing, and it's just like, I'm doing exactly what I'm in the world to do, and this is just perfect. Doesn't matter what happens afterwards. I've been to the mountain, and we say to people, all you have to do is just keep moving up and down through the mansion. And as you do that, you'll notice, my actions don't match my feelings, or this doesn't make sense to me, or I've lost my spiritual connection. I have to get it back. It's become a kind of a robot. I've been looking after everyone in the family, but I haven't looked after myself. I need to go away for a weekend and just get my roots back in the ground. The 4-story mansion guides you, and you start knowing what to do. It's very different to trying to figure out what to do. It's just one day, you just know this job isn't for me, or this friend isn't a friend, or me and this child have got to go away together and discover each other again. And once you know it, there's no problem doing it because you just know.
And so for you, spirituality, you talk about social justice being a big part of that. It's when there's something bigger than yourself, which is spirituality. But you also talk about how spirituality can be tough.
Yes.
And I appreciate that.
Yes, because one of the things that happens, and I think it's, you can talk to teenagers about this because teenagers are very spiritually activated. There's an activation happening in them, which we've often failed to meet or address. And at the core of that is that we are not in this world for ourselves. And the culture we live in is very, very toxic because its key message is seek your own status, importance, satisfaction, pleasure, that you are the most important thing in the universe. And that is always a recipe for pain. Whereas as kids discover, well, I like having fun and I like dancing and music and everything else in the world and being around the opposite sex and everything is really fantastic. But I feel best when I'm doing something for other people. And so we see in these movements that, the school strike for climate is so important. If we don't solve climate change, then why worry about raising our kids if they're going to die in floods and famines? We have to address that, and kids are very activated to that. If you're a spiritual person, and people who we recognize as the greatest spiritual leaders, very engaged with injustice and speaking, and always confronting the people in power and always organizing and voicing that we have to look after each other and the planet. And so spirituality is private on the one sense, but on the other, it's enormous. And for people who have a secular background, I say it's like the aerial on your mobile phone. Your mobile phone is a fantastic device, but if it's not on the network, it doesn't do much. It plays a bit of music, takes some photos, but it's the network that's the magic. And your spiritual sense is you being on the cosmic network, attuned to God, attuned to hearing the voice of the divine in your life. I forget who it was that said that. You're just always listening for that voice, trying to hear the promptings of that voice, and never knowing for sure, but every single day thinking, what am I put in the world to do today? And if you're quiet enough, then that will be coming to you on all four floors.
Beautiful. Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to end with a quote from near the beginning of your book. You wrote, "What you think a human being is probably the most important thing about you, because it decides how you treat everyone you ever meet and how you treat yourself." Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for talking to us today about what it means to be a fully integrated person and how we can model this to our children, and how we can continue to be growing as human beings.
You asked me wonderful questions, Collett, and I'm sure your listeners will be so grateful to you for prompting this conversation. Much love to everyone listening, and bye-bye.
We've all experienced what Steve talks about as that super sense. That just because it's difficult to put a label on our gut instinct or our intuition doesn't mean it's irrational or wrong. I think the more we pay attention to it, the better we will begin to recognize it. It's fascinating that we now understand the science behind this sense. If you would like to know more about Steve's latest talks or his books, you can find him at stevebiddulph.com. Thank you so much for listening to Season 4. We have some great guests coming up in Season 5, and we have a special episode coming soon where I sit down and tackle questions that you have sent me. If you have any other questions of your own, you can find us at the Raising Teens podcast page at hope1032.com or contact me through my Facebook page at Collett Smart. I look forward to chatting with you in Season 5, but in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adults in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.